The silenced legacy. The daughter he never knew the heart-shattering truth. Attention. What would you do if you discovered your daughter, whom you thought you had lost, has been alive and growing up without you for 6 years? We are about to unveil a truth that will shake a life to its core. Before you dive into this emotional whirlwind, give us a like if you believe in the power of truth. Subscribe to the channel and tell us in the comments what you would do in this devastating situation. He left his house thinking it was just another event. But then he paused. A little girl was running across the playground. She had his eyes. And behind her, Isabella Duran, the woman he thought he had lost. The woman he was told had aborted their child. But there, in front of him, was the truth. She never terminated the pregnancy, and that little girl was his. Now, he only wanted to know, why did she leave? And why was his daughter hidden from him for 6 years? 1. The devastating reunion. The March sky over Seattle was clear but gray. One of those mornings where the sun insists on coming out, but something in the air, perhaps the weight of unspoken memories, pushes the clouds back. Dario Alcazar adjusted his suit for the 3rd time, annoyed by the starched collar scraping his neck. He was late, as always. But it didn't matter. No one expected more than his presence, and he knew how to occupy space with the coolness of someone trained not to linger. The school was old, charming, with arched windows and walls worn by time. Children ran in messy lines, some holding balloons, others with paint-stained hands. The charity event, promoted by a social arm of his family's corporation, was nothing more than a pretext, a showcase, a public relations sigh he didn't even pretend to believe in. He entered the playground, indifference weighing on his broad shoulders. Greetings, flashes, empty speeches. He was about to leave when something, not a sound, not a touch, but a dry shiver, stopped him. The laughter. It wasn't loud, nor attention-seeking. But it was familiar, like an ancestral echo torn from deep within his chest. He turned his head slowly, like someone who knows that what they are about to see cannot be undone. And he saw a little girl running across the packed earth playground, her blue dress fluttering as if the world had turned down the volume just for her to pass. Loose brown hair, sun-kissed skin. She was missing a front tooth and had a laugh. That laugh. She stumbled, bit her lower lip to stifle the giggle, exactly as he did, and ran toward a woman. Dario felt a knot in his stomach. There, just a few feet from him, was Isabella. Like a ghost time forgot to bury. She wore a simple white blouse, her hair pulled back carelessly. She had new wrinkles at the corners of her eyes, a straighter, firmer posture. But it was her. Still her. Their eyes met, and the world, for one full second, dissolved into silence. The sounds of the playground vanished. The commotion, the people, the children's laughter. Everything faded. Only the image remained. Mother and daughter. Together. Alive. Real. His throat constricted. His fingers tingled. His heart, which until then beat to the tasteless rhythm of someone who expected nothing anymore, accelerated as if trying to escape. The girl took Isabella's hand and smiled at her, before disappearing through a side door, and he stood there, immobile, the past hammering like a siren in his ears. Isabella? 6 years. She was pregnant the last time he saw her, and he had believed she had aborted. No, he knew she had. That's what he was told. What he was shown. The letter. The recording. The clinic. But now, that little girl was him. It was his laugh, his way of walking, the way she looked down when someone stared too long. Dario's hand trembled, and he didn't even notice he was still holding the leather folder with the event documents. The leather slipped, falling to the ground, but he didn't bend down. He couldn't. The air around him felt thin. His daughter? No, he couldn't claim her. But yes, he could. Yes, he could. He knew it. He felt it. Who is she? He asked quietly, almost to himself. But one of the school coordinators, a woman with a chirpy voice and a practiced smile, approached. "Mr. Alcazar, is everything all right? You look pale." He didn't answer. His eyes remained fixed on the door where Isabella had entered. And everything hurt. As if that instant was not just a reunion, but a broken mirror of the past, throwing shards into the present. The woman repeated, "Do you need some water?" "No," Dario answered dryly, his lips tight. "I need to know who she is." "Excuse me?" The coordinator looked confused. "Oh, you must be talking about the new volunteer mom. She signed up last month. She's helping with the children's workshop. Her name is Isabella. Isabella White." He didn't hear the rest. The name was enough. It was like a blade slicing through the flesh of dormant memories. Isabella. The name he had spent 6 years trying to rip out of himself. The name his family forbade him to utter. That friends pretended to forget. That he tried to hate and failed. She was here, and she had a daughter. A daughter with his face. He took a step forward. He stopped. He took another. His legs felt like lead. His breathing tore at his throat. His head pounded with disconnected memories, hands entwined in an empty park, nights reading whispered poetry, the discovery of the pregnancy, the fear, the euphoria, and then the silence, the letter, the disdain, the end. But what if it had all been a lie? It wasn't possible. But it was. The girl couldn't be a coincidence. Dario walked out of the school, his body on autopilot. He walked down the sidewalk as if he were pierced by something that didn't fit into the present. The wind brought him the sound of children playing, but he heard nothing. In his mind, only one question. A question that burned inside him like acid. Did she never abort? The world, which until then had been made of uncomfortable certainties and calculated routines, had split in two. And now, only urgency remained. He needed to know the truth. Why? If that was what he suspected, if that little girl was his daughter, then Dario no longer had the right to walk around as if nothing had happened. He stopped at the corner. He leaned against an old stone wall. He closed his eyes tightly. Deep in his chest, where there was once a dull void, something began to scream. It wasn't just anger. It was loss. It was time. It was guilt. And it was love. A love so old it already seemed invented, but which now had a name, a face, and eyes, just like his. He opened his eyes. He looked at the sky that was beginning to clear. The sun finally broke through the gray. But inside him, the storm had just begun. And it wasn't just made of doubts. It was made of memories, of a time when everything seemed possible. Before the lies, before the letters that weren't hers, before the falsified voices on recordings that would destroy everything, before the fall, before interactive question. How do you think Dario will discover the truth about what truly happened? Who do you suspect orchestrated the separation and the lies? Share your theories in the comments, too. The weight of the lies. Dario closed his eyes. Images flooded back with force, as if somewhere inside him a seal over a bleeding memory had broken. He still remembered the first time he saw Isabella. It was a cold Friday, late autumn, at an event he never would have willingly attended, a photography exhibition in a decaying cultural center downtown. His driver was late. The car had broken down, and he walked the streets like someone running from himself. The window of the cultural space flickered with an old sign announcing fragments of the everyday. He went in reluctantly, or perhaps wanting to escape, and there she was, sitting on the floor, in front of a photo of an old woman sewing by candlelight. She had a notebook on her lap, her hair falling over her shoulders, and her eyes. God, her eyes. They weren't beautiful in the conventional sense. They were serene, deep, as if they had time to listen. She didn't see him, but he did. And for long minutes he stood there, not knowing why, watching a stranger write, while the world seemed suspended around them. When she finally looked up and faced him, she didn't show surprise, nor did she look away. She simply looked at him, and then smiled. "You've been watching me for quite a while," she said, without getting up. Her voice was not sweet. It was firm, contained, as if she were more accustomed to silence than compliments. He didn't know what to say. He replied with the truth. "You look like someone who knows what they're looking for." She laughed, closed her notebook. "I never know. That's why I write." That was it. Nothing epic. Nothing rehearsed. But what began there didn't end. When he left the cultural center that night, because he came back, 2 days later, and then again, and then, when she realized he was already part of her Tuesdays, of the short walks to the bus stop, of the conversations that started with, "Do you believe in fate?" and ended in comfortable silences. Dario was not easy to love, not because he was harsh, but because he lived in a world that forced him to always be someone he wasn't. Social smiles, automatic answers, futures planned by other hands. But Isabella didn't want the last name, or the expensive dinners. She loved him when he arrived with rain-soaked hair, with a poorly read poem in his hand, with questions about life that sounded more like muffled screams. And she was difficult, too. She didn't open up easily. She didn't offer her dreams on a platter. She carried a sadness on her shoulders that not even her 20s could hide. She rarely spoke of her mother, never of her father. She worked part-time in a fabric store and studied at night with the look of someone who couldn't afford to fail. They complemented each other in a way no one had planned. But the love that united them was not simple, because he couldn't escape the world he lived in. And that world began to close in too soon. It was a spring afternoon when Isabella told him about the pregnancy. They were sitting on a park bench, eating carnival sweets, and laughing at some silly joke about how his hands were always cold. She placed her hands on her belly and whispered, "Dario, there's something." He looked at her, distracted. "I'm pregnant." His world stopped. But not like today. Not like at the school. It stopped with light. He hugged her. He laughed. Then he cried. He said he wanted everything. That they would figure it out. That nothing else mattered. She trembled. He took her face in his hands. "I won't let anything hurt you. I swear it." She believed him. And he believed it too. For a while. But then the Alcazars arrived. They came like a whirlwind. Dario's mother was the first. She didn't shout. She didn't cry. She simply arranged a silent meeting in the family mansion's study, with English tea, a confidentiality agreement, and a glacial gaze. "You are going to end this, and then you are going to London. She is pregnant, so she stays away. We will not allow a girl from the wrong side of town to destroy what we have built for generations." "It's not her who will destroy it, it's you," Dario had shouted. His father wasn't so restrained. He used words like shame, failure, disinheritance. He said that if he didn't break everything off, he would lose everything. The apartment, the name, the shares, the inheritance. "Then disinherit me," Dario had screamed. But it wasn't that simple. They isolated him, blocked his accounts, cut lines, took his phone, and sent him to London with the excuse of an international company program. He tried to resist. He tried to write. He tried to call. But the answers vanished. And little by little, he began to believe that Isabella had chosen to move on alone until he received the letter. "I don't want this, baby. Forget me." And the recording. "Do what you have to do. Don't look for me anymore." It destroyed him. It destroyed him with rage, with denial, with shame. But he believed it, because he wanted to believe that love wasn't as strong as he thought, that she, like everything else, had given up. But now, years later, that little girl in the blue dress came to tug at the truth like an anchor in the pit of his chest. And Dario knew it. He knew he had lost something. He knew their love was born at the wrong time. But that didn't make it less real. Perhaps it made it even more so. Because even after all the silence, all the lies, it still hurt. It still burned like an open wound. And as he walked down the street back to his car, the warm afternoon wind brought him an aroma, perhaps perfume, perhaps memory. He remembered one night, the two of them, at her mother's house, a small, cramped room, with peeling paint, and a mattress on the floor. She reciting Rumi with her eyes closed, his head in her lap. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I'm scared," he replied. "Of what?" "That all this won't last." She smiled, touched his face. "Love isn't made to last. It's made to hurt. But if it hurts for both of us, it's worth it." Now, he understood. Their love hurt. It still hurt. And perhaps it was still alive. But in that time, everything they had was buried. Call to action. What do you think really happened to Isabella? Why did she believe Dario abandoned her? And who was behind the letter and the recording? Share your theories in the comments and give us a like if you're hooked on this story. 3. The price of the lie, 3 months. That was all it took. 3 months of gestation, and the ground beneath Isabella's feet disappeared. Dario's messages, which used to arrive like small sighs in the middle of the day, stopped. At first, she thought it was due to his schedule change, then to stress. But then came the blank days, calls that went straight to voicemail, silences that no longer had excuses. She waited, sitting on the same park bench where he had told her he would never leave her. She waited with her hand on her belly, still shapeless, but already filled with fear. The nights grew long, and she began to hear the sounds of the house like echoes of something she couldn't name. The next morning, the letter arrived, folded into quarters. No envelope. Slipped under the door of the small apartment she rented with sacrifice. The handwriting was his. She would recognize that imperfect, rushed hand even in the dark. The words were cold, short, cutting. "I don't want this, baby. Forget me." Her world collapsed in silence. Isabella sat on the kitchen floor, the sheet in her hands. The ink was slightly smeared in the lower corner, as if he had cried while writing it. But she couldn't believe it. She felt the floor disappear beneath her legs, and yet she didn't cry. She only cried later, when she touched her belly and whispered, as if begging any god, "Tell me this isn't real." But it was. The next afternoon, she received a call from a private number. She answered, her voice almost gone, expecting to hear Dario, to hear anything. But what she heard was worse than silence. It was his voice, cold, unhesitating. "Do what you have to do. Don't look for me anymore." She dropped the phone to the floor, without hanging up. She leaned against the wall, and let her body slide down to sit on the cold floor. The next morning, she found a letter from the clinic. Everything was already scheduled. Name, date, payment made. A car would be available to pick her up if needed. It was then she understood. None of this came from Dario. It couldn't. The handwriting on the letter was his, but the content was not. The voice was his, but the tone was hollow, as if it had been manufactured, fabricated. And she knew that family. She knew them too well. She knew what they were capable of. Isabella didn't go to the clinic. She didn't answer the letters. She turned off her phone. She broke her SIM card. She disappeared. She fled with a rolling suitcase. 2 coats, 300 euros, and a notebook with names she had thought of for her daughter. Because without needing an ultrasound, she already knew it would be a girl. She went to the bus terminal with no fixed destination. She just wanted to get away. From his scent on her clothes. From the memories in the mirror. From the certainty that she loved someone who had perhaps become a stranger. She went to the coast. Then, inland. She cleaned. She sewed. She washed dishes. She watched her belly grow under a waitress uniform. And she slept on borrowed mattresses, afraid that someone might find her and take away what was yet to be born. For a while, Isabella hated Dario. Then she stopped hating him, because hate also demanded hope, and she had none left. She only had her daughter. And a name. Lila. Lila arrived on a cold dawn. The hospital was simple, and she was alone. She screamed in pain, in fear, in guilt. When she heard the first cry, she felt a part of her body open that she had never known before. She didn't know how to care for a baby, but she learned. She learned to warm a bottle in a pot, to pull back her hair with one hand, and to change diapers while she herself cried. She learned to survive, without luxuries, without rest. But with that little girl who looked at her as if she lacked nothing. At first, Isabella thought of looking for Dario, sending a letter, telling him the truth. But how could she trust someone who had been capable of hurting her so deeply? The doubt still lingered. What if all that really came from him? What if he had given up? The answer came months later, one ordinary afternoon. She was in a small shop, buying milk, when she saw the cover of a cheap magazine on the counter. The Alcazar heir returns from Europe and takes over the presidency of the group's European arm. The photo was recent. Him, at an event, holding a glass, smiling. And in the caption, after a brief stay in Europe, Dario Alcazar returns to the country and states that he is focused on business. Love, today, is not a priority. She looked at him as if she were looking at a grave. Not because he had moved on, but because the image confirmed the separation of their worlds. He had returned, and he hadn't looked for her. That was enough. There, she decided. Her daughter would not carry that name. She would not know the humiliation. She would not bear the weight of rejection on her shoulders. But deep down, no matter how hard she tried, she could never erase Dario from her daughter's eyes. Because he was there. In the way she frowned, in how she went silent when she thought too much, in her love for books, in how quickly she learned new words, in her habit of observing before speaking. Lila was him. But she was also hers, and Isabella swore she would do everything differently, that she would not let the past dictate who her daughter would be. The unspoken truth. On the other side of the world, Dario returned from London with his body loaded with unanswered questions. His mother greeted him with a silent dinner, and the news that Isabella had rebuilt her life with someone else. He didn't question it. He didn't want to hear more. He swallowed the poison. He accepted the grief for something he never got to live. And for years, he lived in the shadow of what might have been. He pushed love into locked drawers, while his soul got used to surviving. He tried other relationships. None lasted. No woman had that fierce calm. No one looked at him as if they saw beyond his name, his money, his family, until that day, that playground, that little girl with mirroring eyes, and Isabella. There, with a gaze that didn't hate him, but didn't recognize him either. There, the truth hit so hard that time split in two. It wasn't fate. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a trap. Delicate, cold, precise, laid by hands that couldn't tolerate losing control. And into that trap, 2 lives were cast into the abyss. Now, after everything, only one certainty remained. They never stopped loving each other. But someone decided that wasn't enough. And for years, that was enough to destroy them. Interactive question. What will Dario do now that he knows the truth? Will Isabella's family get involved? Share your thoughts and predictions in the comments. 4. Rebuilding from scratch. Dario understood that he needed to learn how to live with the past. His new house was not luxurious. It didn't have a panoramic elevator, Italian marble, or staff waiting for orders. But it had something he had never had before. A good silence. That kind of silence that doesn't pressure, that doesn't crush. A silence that welcomes. The first Sunday, he stood by the kitchen door for almost an hour, watching the light of the sunset stream through the window and illuminate the scratched wooden floor. It was there that he wanted to rebuild. Start from scratch, not as Dario Alcazar, the heir, but as Dario, the man who lost 6 years to a lie, and who now wanted to recover them, one day at a time. In the following days, he started with small things. He invited Lila for ice cream at the local park. He brought illustrated children's books under his arm, pretending he had just found a copy he thought she would like. Sometimes she accepted. Other times, she simply smiled politely and said she had other plans. And that was fine. He didn't insist. He was willing to wait. Lila was curious. She didn't seem intimidated by him, but she didn't throw herself into his arms either. She observed, like Isabella, with those big, attentive eyes that said much more than she let slip. When he appeared with something, she would ask, "Did you bring this because you wanted to, or because you think you have to?" And he would laugh nervously, answering with honesty, "Because I don't know how to do this right, but I'm trying." She accepted, without judgment. She sat beside him, listened, and then walked back into the house, like someone still deciding if this new character in her world was going to stay or disappear like the others. Isabella watched everything from a distance. She made an effort to maintain a certain reserve, as if she still couldn't relax seeing him there, present, constant, committed. There was something in her eyes that hadn't lowered its guard yet. She was afraid, not of him, but of the pain of allowing herself to believe again. Sometimes she would come home from work and find Dario and Lila drawing on the porch with colored chalks. Other times, she would see them on the sofa, him trying to understand math homework, while Lila, impatient and stubborn, crossed her arms, saying his way of explaining was a bit convoluted. And he would laugh, accepting it. He learned to laugh at himself with her. The third weekend, he brought flowers. They weren't expensive roses or extravagant arrangements. It was a bouquet of daisies and lavender, wrapped in newspaper. Lila opened the door and saw the flowers. "Are they for Mom?" "Yes," he replied. "She's going to say it wasn't necessary." "I know, but she'll like them." Isabella appeared at the door shortly after, not quite understanding. Lila handed her the flowers and ran off to the yard. "I didn't ask for these," she said, cutting the bouquet carefully. "I know, but I felt like bringing them to you." "Why?" "Because I remembered the smell of your hair after the rain. It always had that scent of lavender with something warm that I could never name." She looked away. She pressed her lips together. She didn't say anything. But she put the flowers in a vase with water and left them on the kitchen table. They stayed there. They were not thrown away. The next morning, he arrived earlier. He brought a brush, 3 colored hair ties, and a tutorial saved on his phone. "Can I try?" Lila hesitated, then nodded. He sat behind her, his hands trembling, trying to understand where one strand began and another ended. He messed up. He undid it. He tried again, until after 20 minutes, a crooked braid took shape. "It's awful," she said. "It's authentic. Can I only wear it inside the house?" "Of course," and she smiled. For the first time, a full, unreserved smile. That night, Isabella came home from work and found them both sitting on the porch. He was making pancakes on an electric griddle, the syrup spilling awkwardly. Lila was telling him something about a book, and he was listening as if it were the most important thing in the world. Isabella stopped at the door. Her heart raced because that was what she had dreamed of, a man kneeling beside her daughter. A man who listens, who makes mistakes, who laughs at his mistakes, who comes back. She crossed her arms and leaned against the doorframe. She stood there, immobile, trying to understand what she felt. But her body spoke before her thoughts. Her eyes filled with tears. Her chest felt lighter, and a small smile escaped her, without her being able to stop it. Lila looked back, saw her mother, and shouted, "He burned the pancake!" Dario turned and smiled. "But the next one will be perfect." Isabella laughed, and for the first time, without fear. Interactive question. What do you think is the turning point for Isabella? What does this mean for Dario's role in their lives? Share your thoughts in the comments. A Love Reborn. In the following weeks, he started picking up Lila from school on Fridays. He had learned to make oatmeal without it sticking to the pot, and he finally figured out the difference between correction fluid and school paint. After washing glitter off his face for 3 days in a row, Isabella watched everything. Little by little, the rigidity of her shoulders lessened. She started offering him coffee when he arrived. Then, they ate dinner together, out of convenience at first. But soon, dinners turned into long conversations. They laughed, remembering old stories. They discussed Lila's education. They planned small changes to their routine. And one warm afternoon, while Lila rode her bike in the yard, something changed. Dario was kneeling, holding the back of the bike without training wheels. Lila pedaled with difficulty, her arms tense. But she didn't give up. She tried. She failed. She tried again. "You're going to fall," he said. "I know. Aren't you scared?" "Yes, but you're here. Don't you want me to let go?" "Maybe you'll let go. But you'll be there when it happens." She lost her balance. He ran. He caught her, and she fell, laughing. Isabella was on the porch. She saw everything. She saw her daughter on the ground, dirty with grass, laughing heartily. She saw Dario lying beside her, also laughing, as if the world made sense again. And then, without thinking, she walked down the steps. She went to them. She sat on the ground. Lila went to play with a random twig, oblivious to the tension in the air. Dario remained silent. She looked at him. "You stayed. I stayed. I never thought I could look at you without feeling pain. And now?" She took a deep breath. "Now, I feel something else." He didn't say anything. His eyes searched hers, and in the silence that followed, they both knew. It was Isabella who leaned in, slowly, as if something was being unearthed inside her. When their lips touched, the world didn't explode. There was no music, no sky opening, just a meeting. Warm, full, familiar. When they separated, she whispered, "This changes everything. This starts everything." The next day, he brought flowers again, lavender and daisies, the same ones. But this time, not to remember the past. It was for the now. Isabella held the bouquet, looked at him with calm eyes. "What do you want?" "To take care of you, if you let me." She took a moment to answer. Her eyes stung. Her voice came out as a sigh. "Yes." And that yes wasn't just for him. It was for her too. Because loving after the fall required courage. But she was no longer afraid. And that changed everything. Because living without fear was the only way to live truthfully. 6. A restored family. In the following months, Isabella learned to breathe with a full chest again. Lila woke up every day lighter, more talkative, more complete. And Dario, increasingly present, stopped being just a man who had returned and became the father he chose to be. In every gesture, in every respected silence. It was as if that house, small and smelling of bread in the morning, was molding itself around a new invisible structure, made of trust, care, and patience. But there was an echo that still hit the walls. The past, the reunion with Dario, and the reconstruction of their affection had not undone what had been taken from her. The lost time, the stolen youth, the grief for a story that almost didn't get a second chance. And most of all, there was a wound that wasn't hers. It was Lila's, a pain her daughter didn't know how to name, but which still loomed from afar, like the shadow of a secret that would soon be too big to ignore. The news arrived one autumn afternoon, a short, almost shy message on Dario's phone. "We would like to meet the girl, if possible." It was from his mother. Isabella read the text over his shoulder and said nothing. She just waited. Dario took a few seconds, then asked, lowering the phone, "Do you want me to answer them?" She took a deep breath, looked out the window. Lila was playing in the garden, holding a rag doll, and talking to the plants, as if the world were simple. They want to see their granddaughter, now that they know she exists, after hiding the truth from you for 6 years, after buying our silence with lies. "I know," Dario said, "but they are also her grandparents. And they stopped being your parents when they made you believe I abandoned you." There was silence. Dario sat down at the table. "I don't want to force anything. If this opens a door that you still have closed, then the decision is not mine. It's yours." She turned, looked at him for a few seconds. "I don't need to see the parents who destroyed my life. I know. But maybe she needs to see the grandparents who didn't know hers." The next morning, Isabella prepared coffee with trembling hands. Lila was drawing in the living room, humming some invented song. Dario sent a short message. "Tomorrow, at 10. There was no reply, but the next day, at 9:45 a.m., the black car parked in front of the house. Dario's father got out first. He was thinner, more stooped, with whiter hair. He wore the same old suit, but it no longer fit him well on the shoulders. Then his mother got out. She wore a simple light gray dress, and her eyes were heavily made up, as if trying to hide her exhaustion. They stopped in front of the gate. Dario opened it. "Come in." Isabella watched from afar, from the living room threshold. Lila already knew something was different. She watched the movement with a more attentive gaze than usual. Dario's mother stopped in front of the girl. She smiled shyly. "You must be Lila." The girl looked at her, frowned, like someone measuring distances with her eyes. "Yes, I'm your grandmother." Lila didn't answer. She simply walked closer, looked at the woman's face, as if trying to recognize her from within. And then, in a disarming gesture, she hugged her. It was brief, but it was real. And before that, the woman couldn't resist. She burst into tears. She knelt down on the earth of the yard, and she cried like someone carrying an ancestral weight. Dario's father stood still. He didn't cry. He didn't move. He just looked at his granddaughter, as if she were made of glass. Lila broke the hug and ran to get her doll. Dario's mother wiped her tears. She stood up slowly. Isabella appeared in the doorway. She was firm, but not cold. She crossed her arms, looked directly at the two of them. "I have no idea what you expect from me." Dario's mother tried to speak, but her voice failed her. It was his father who stepped forward. "We made a mistake. With you, with Dario, with Lila. No excuses, only regret." Isabella didn't answer immediately. She wanted to look him in the eyes. She wanted to see if the same man who once threatened to disinherit his own son for loving the wrong person was still there. But no, that man was gone. In his place was a tired, empty old man, a man too broken to fake pride. "I'm not here to seek justice," she said. "I don't want revenge. I don't want to shout. And I don't need you to beg for forgiveness on your knees." She took a deep breath and concluded, "I forgive you, but I don't forget. For her, not for you." Dario's mother cried again, but Isabella didn't go to her. She just took a step aside, allowing them to enter. The two crossed the threshold. They entered a house that wasn't theirs, but which now housed their granddaughter. Dario stood next to Isabella, in silence. She squeezed his hand. "Thank you," he whispered. "Don't thank me. Just don't make me regret it." He nodded. Later, Lila was drawing at the table with colored pencils. She made 3 drawings. In the first, her and her mom. In the second, her and Dario. And in the third, she drew all of them together, with a phrase underneath, written in crooked letters. "My family is getting bigger." Isabella saw the drawing and covered her laugh with her fingers. "That's how you feel?" Lila nodded. "Some people arrive late, but they arrive. That night when everyone was gone, and the girl was asleep. Dario made tea. The two sat on the porch, without rushing. "Do you think she'll understand everything someday?" "I think she already understands the essential," Isabella replied. "That love is not perfection, it's persistence." Dario looked at her. "And us? What about us? Our love? Do you think it survived because of persistence?" She took a sip of her tea and answered calmly, "No, it survived because, even though everything hurt, I could never lie to myself. And now I just want peace." He smiled, "And it has a name." She smiled back, "Lila." And for the first time in years, the past fell silent. Not because it had been forgotten, but because finally, it had been heard. The past rested peacefully in the back of the house, like an old trunk of letters that no one forgot, but which no longer needed to be opened every day. Interactive question. Do you think Dario's parents will truly change? What does the future hold for this family? Share your thoughts in the comments. 7. The True Home. Epilogue. The mornings of a real family began with the smell of bread. Coming out of the electric oven, Dario had bought on sale, insisting he would learn to make Lila's favorite recipes. He always failed the first few batches, until the bread came out as dense as the silence of the first breakfasts the three shared. But now, on Tuesdays, the house woke up with the right aroma. It was Lila who first shouted from the porch, "Mommy, the bread didn't burn today?" And Isabella, already with her notebook in her lap and a pen behind her ear, replied without looking up, "That's almost a miracle." Dario came out with his apron stained with flour and pride on his face, like someone who knows that nothing there is grand. But everything is true. Little by little, that house became a refuge. On the living room wall, Lila's drawings were taped up, photographs in simple frames, and a handwritten to-do list. Water the plants. Don't forget the bread. Check the homework. On the shelf, books mixed with dolls. And on the sofa, the three snuggled up on Sundays to watch old movies, while sharing the same lavender-scented blanket. Isabella wrote more now. She wrote without fear, without looking over her shoulder, without thinking about what might have been. Her stories came with different endings, not necessarily happy, but honest. Stories where love didn't save, but sustained. Where characters didn't run from pain, but walked through it with dignity. Lila often asked to be a character in the stories. "But I want to fly," she would say. "Then you will be a girl with wings that only grow when you're not afraid," Isabella would reply. And is she afraid? Almost always, but she learns to fly anyway. Across the yard, Dario tended the garden. He planted a row of daisies next to the wall, saying he wanted something that would withstand the rain. Then he scattered rosemary, mint, and lavender near the kitchen. One day, Lila looked at him with dirt-stained hands and said, "It looks like you didn't know how to plant anything before. Not even people, daughter, not even people." She didn't understand, but she smiled anyway. The relationship between the three was not perfect. There were days when Dario was late, days when Isabella shut down, days when Lila shouted, "It's not fair," over small things, like the lack of internet or the wrong color of a new notebook. But even those days served a purpose. They learned to come back. They learned to talk, to listen, to apologize. And that was new for all of them. One spring afternoon, Lila came home from school with an envelope. A genealogy project. "I need my family history," she said, pulling a scribbled sheet from her backpack. Names, where they live, how they met. Isabella and Dario looked at each other. They sat down with her at the table. They told it simply. They avoided the details that still hurt, but they told the truth that mattered, that they met by chance, that they loved each other deeply, that they were separated by lies, that one day they reunited, that they decided to stay. "And when did I arrive?" "You were always here," Dario said, pointing to his chest, "even when we didn't know it." Lila smiled, but didn't write anything down immediately. The next day, she handed her teacher a sheet with a single sentence. "My family is the one that chose to stay together, even when the world tried to tear us apart." On the porch, Isabella hung new pages on her writing board. She hung up ideas, loose phrases, fragments of unfinished texts. One of them read, "She was not saved. She clung to the little she had, and she stood tall. Alone? But now, she is no longer alone." From the gate, Dario arrived with a bouquet of simple flowers in his hand. He had left work early, now as a consultant for social projects and small businesses. Before entering, he paused for a few seconds, watching the woman he loved. She saw him. "I'm finishing a text," she said. "It's beautiful. It's still incomplete, like everything worth living." She smiled, stood up, walked toward him. The kiss was light, prolonged, without promises, without urgency, just present. Lila shouted from the yard, "Are you going to keep kissing all day?" Isabella laughed against Dario's mouth. "If I had my way, yes." And he completed, "If I had my way, for life." Later, while the girl slept, they heard distant thunder. The rain came slowly, drumming on the roof. The two lay down on the sofa, a blanket covering their feet. They didn't say anything for a while. Isabella turned her face toward him. "Do you know what I realized today?" "What?" "That I'm no longer afraid of losing. Because now I know who I am, and what we have, no one can take from us anymore." He held her hand. "And I know what I was about to lose, and I won't repeat it." She rested her head on his shoulder, looked at the ceiling. "For a long time I thought I needed to be saved, that someone would come, that everything would change. But it was me who held my pain in my arms. It was me who built something with what was left. And now I can love without forgetting myself." He kissed her forehead. "And I can love without hiding behind the name they gave me." Lila coughed in her room. They got up together and went to check on her. The girl was sleeping, wrapped in blankets, her face serene, surrendered, calm. On the desk, taped up, was the school project, and on it, next to the names of her mother and father, was written, Lila Alcazar White. Isabella looked at it and felt something she had never felt before. It wasn't euphoria. It wasn't relief. It was peace. That peace had a name. It had a color. It had a home. And it had a story that was almost destroyed. But love chose to rebuild it. With silence. With pain. With time. But above all, with truth. This is not just a story of a reunion. It is the story of everything time has destroyed. It is the story of everything love gives you the courage to rebuild. What are your final reflections on this incredibly emotional journey? Do you believe some wounds can truly be repaired, or are there limits to forgiveness? Tell us in the comments. And if this story moved you, give us a like, share it, and subscribe, because we still have many truths to reveal.